G'day, The Other Side is on holiday until Friday, July 11. We'll be back with brand new show, episode 417. In the meantime, here's a flashback clip from the first half of 2025. Two Labor Party ministers were sensationally dumped this week from Albo's leadership team for his second term of government. Sad for them. But the significance of this needs to be underlined. You see, all of this relates to stuff going on behind the scenes that we, the voters of Australia, only get to see the tip of the iceberg of. But the upshot of it all is this. The new Labor government is the most left-wing we have probably ever had. It might even be more left-wing than that of Gough Whitlam half a century ago. And that's saying something. Here's a quote from Whitlam's speech to the ALP Federal Conference in 1973. "We believe that a basic function of government is to redistribute wealth and power in favour of the great majority of Australians who depend on their livelihood, on their own exertions." Gough Whitlam. That is as pure Marxist as it gets. Except maybe for this 1972 attack on the most important principle of freedom, private ownership.
We will make a massive attack on the problem of land and housing costs. The land is the basic property of the Australian people. It's the people's land. And we will fight for the right of all Australian people to have access to it at fair prices.
Sounds lovely, as left-wing policy always does, until you remember that when he says it's the people's land, that really means the government will take it from the people and own it for you. And me and my 5 mates are the government. Then it starts to make a lot more sense. You will own nothing and be happy. Eat the bugs. Anyway, fast forward half a century, and here we are again, staring down the barrel of a left-wing hell 3 years. Labor's factions are pretty well defined and linked to unions that provide them with resources and funding. Each of the factions has a different union. The left faction is now totally dominant in the party room, what they call the caucus, the elected MPs, the senators and House of Reps members. In the Hawke era, the right faction was led by Paul Keating and Graham Richo Richardson. They totally ruled. This kept things balanced to stop the party and government slipping too far into the nutty left-wing world of radical Whitlam-style socialism. But following this election in 2025, and Labor now having a whopping 93 lower house MPs and likely 28 senators, the left have now become the major and dominant force inside the party room. And that is bad news for tax-paying Australians. The next 3 years are going to be hell for us on the centre, right and right. Albo himself is from the left faction. Now, both of the two dumped ministers, the former Attorney General Mark Dreyfus and the former Industry and Science Minister Ed Husic, were from the right faction. Because of how the numbers stacked up, the New South Wales right had to lose one person in the ministry, that was Husic, and the Victorian right had to lose one person in the ministry, that was Dreyfus. The Prime Minister could step in and override these factional deals and have whatever ministers he wants, but Albo decided not to do it in this case, even though his power inside the party right now is at an all-time high. By the way, when the right in New South Wales had to choose who to dump, they'd already decided it had to be a bloke. Quota reasons, of course. Note the lack of reference to anything actually important or good for Australia, like, merit or talent or actual ability or capability or something, the quality of job they were doing. It's actually the second time that Ed Husic has been dumped in a factional ousting in his career. Back in 2019, he had to shuffle aside to make way for the now long-forgotten Christina Keneally. He took that on the chin back then, he says, but he says the favour wasn't returned this time. And in a truly unusual and astounding move, Mr Husic took to the media to dump on his own Deputy Prime Minister, Richard Marles, publicly, calling him a factional assassin this week. It started with an appearance on the ABC Insiders program last Sunday morning, which was arranged before he was dumped. In that interview, Husic said he was dumped for being outspoken and opposing the leadership during his time in the cabinet, the ministry. This is interesting because Husic is the child of immigrants and he's a Muslim. He was the first minister to ever be sworn in using a Quran. And didn't the Labor Party lefties make a thing of that at the time? Such diversity in the Labor Party. Let's cheer for diversity. They love diversity on the left. Just not diversity of opinion or viewpoints, it seems.
You can't celebrate diversity and then expect it to sit in a corner silent. Like, you need to speak up when you bring those different views to either a cabinet table or a caucus. I certainly took the view you need to speak up for the communities that you care about. I certainly tried to help us navigate wretchedly difficult issues, such as what we're seeing has unfolded in Gaza post the horrors of October 7. You know, there have been times where in previous governments there's been very vigorous debate. We had a government that went for 5 terms. We've had people in senior roles in this government that did the same thing as I did, questioned. And I don't think that's an unhealthy thing. And I certainly don't want one of the lessons out of this that you can't question, because I think there's value in doing.
But you're saying Labor's less tolerant of that debate these days?
I don't think we can afford to be less tolerant.
Was your experience that there was little tolerance for that sort of open debate?
I think there were times where it had to be encouraged.
Yeah, you got to love it when the left's own identity politics hypocrisy starts to eat itself. And here's the really good bit where he just dumps it on the deputy boss.
I live my values. I think it's important to say you sometimes have to make a decision that's good for the collective, and I live my values.
And you're saying your colleagues on this occasion did not live their values?
Well, I think, look, the difficult issue here is that we've had sort of barefaced ambition, and a Deputy Prime Minister wield a factional club to reshape the ministry. I think when people look at a Deputy Prime Minister, they expect to see a statesman, not a factional assassin.
There's some strong words. You're saying Richard Marles has put his own ambition to boost his numbers ahead of the good of the party and the government.
Well, I think a lot of people would draw that conclusion, right? And I think he needed to exercise leadership. He's part of the leadership group. He needs to be able to show that we've got to be able to manage these things in an orderly way. I've tried to show that in times past. I think he can show that.
Wow. That got the media lovies all freaked out. You almost never see the Labor people stepping out of line like that. Very, very naughty. But I think it's good. I think it's healthy. I'm sick of all the pretend unity. Nobody's buying it anyway. And the reality is that our democracy should have diversity of opinion, and we should see public disagreements and spats between MPs so we know who's who and stands for what. There's too much central control in both the major parties in Australia. We need more leaders elected by the people, the rank and file members of the parties too, not just the in-crowd in the caucus. Look, our political parties are not country clubs or corporations where people should be having nice careers. They're meant to be political parties full of people who represent us and serve us. And both major parties have become a little too inside their own heads. This might explain why the Labor primary vote sits at under 35% and the Coalition at 32%. We're sick of their nonsense.
I feel for supporters of our party who went from the high of a Saturday and a terrific and tremendous win to the lows of factional grubbiness. And I just feel like it's been a distraction at the start of what will be a successful second term.
And do you primarily blame Richard Marles for that?
I think Richard has a lot, there will be a lot of questions put to Richard about his role, and that's something that he will have to answer and account for.
You blame him?
Well, I think I've been pretty clear in my last answer.
In terms of
Right. So that is the ABC Insider Show. Ed Husic speaking there, and that full interview, of course, is available on the ABC YouTube channel. All of this politics stuff isn't as important, of course, as our country's future. And one of the reasons I reckon the loss of Ed Husic is really bad for Australia is that he seemed to understand economics a bit. He even once suggested that the company tax rate could be lower, infuriating our very socialist treasurer, Jim Chalmers. Husic was also the architect of what I reckon was one of the very few policies of the Labor government that had vision and supported business and our national growth a little bit, the Future Made in Australia plan. It was all too heavy on the renewables industry and the transition, but at least it was an economic policy with some good ideas for supporting business to grow. Let's hope that one doesn't go down the drain now that the very prominent Labor left faction member, Senator Tim Ayres, is the new Minister for Industry. We hope you enjoyed that clip. The Other Side is on its mid-year break for a couple of weeks. We're back with new content on Friday, July 11. So make sure you join us then. In the meantime, we're going to keep dropping some of these best of clips from throughout the first half of 2025. We hope you enjoy.